Welcome to the Gay Buddhist Forum, where teachers from all schools of Buddhism offer their perspectives on the Dharma and its application in modern times, especially for LGBTQI audiences. These talks are offered freely to the world and made possible by appreciative listeners. If you would like to support our efforts to share the Dharma with underserved audiences, please visit gaybuddhist.org. There you can donate, find a list of upcoming speakers, or enjoy many hundreds of these recorded talks dating back to 1996.
Before I introduce our speaker today, maybe we can go around the room and say our name. Take your time doing this so people can actually kind of absorb what your name is and think about it. So it's not a race. It's a slow race. Okay. I'm David.
I'm Marty. I'm Jeffrey. I'm Douglas.
I'm Brad. I'm Chris. Michael. I'm Tree. Ron. Eldon.
Andrew.
Peter. Brad.
Mike.
Peter.
Kevin.
Francis.
Steve.
Michael.
Chris.
John.
Buzz.
Jack.
He wins. And then over here, Patrick, great. Rolf.
Diane.
And
Bill.
My name is Marty.
Justin.
That's it. Good. Okay, our speaker today is Diana Winston, and she's the founder of the Buddhist Alliance for Social Engagement, which I'm sure everyone's heard of here. Most people have. It's America's first Buddhist volunteer service organization, and she's come back from Asia, where she's been in an intensive retreat for a year as a nun in Burma. And she's, I guess, spent 6 months teaching meditation to village children at a Buddhist school in India. Currently, she's the assistant director of the Buddhist Peace Fellowship, and she's practiced Vipassana for the last 10 years. Thank you.
So, I realized there was a lot in that bio. I'm actually mostly going to talk about my experience in Burma and sort of frame a Dharma talk around that. In the fall of '97, I went to Burma and ordained as a nun and to practice with Sayadaw U Pandita. I don't know how many of you are familiar with him. No familiarity. Okay, he's a Burmese meditation teacher. He's probably one of the leading Vipassana teachers in Burma, and he's known for his very rigorous and intense style. Basically, you go to the monastery, you do a retreat with him, and you work as hard as you possibly can. And there's signs up that say things like, if you're sleeping more than 4 hours a night, you're sleeping too much, or your best isn't good enough. Basically, it's very hardcore, get going, sort of maybe some of the harshest of some Zen teachers. It's an amazing opportunity. It's an incredible opportunity to practice within the context of the cultural setting that Vipassana comes out of. And so he had just started a forest monastery, which was about 40 miles north of Rangoon. And I went there, and after about 6 weeks I ordained, which meant I took 8 precepts, because they don't have a full ordination for women in the Theravada tradition anymore. But I agreed to no killing, no stealing, celibacy, no lying, no intoxicants, and then 3 other rules: not eating after noon, no adorning the body in any way, and no sleeping in high or luxurious beds, which wasn't a problem since they give you a mat. But so So basically what I did was went and started a Vipassana retreat, and it was there was a schedule that you could follow, but I found that I was mostly doing my own schedule and practicing in my own kuti or hut that they gave me, which was sort of a brick hut, and just sit an hour, walk an hour, sit an hour, walk an hour, eat, sit an hour, walk an hour, sit an hour, walk an hour, eat, sit an hour, walk an hour, and that was it the rest of the day. And also, it's so that was essentially that was my schedule for the year. And then there would be a Dharma talk about at least once a week, sometimes every couple of days, and there would be an interview with a teacher that you would have. And so you would go in every 3 or 4 days and tell them how your experiences of watching the breath, and they would say and then you'd go out, and that was essentially the structure of it. And it was translated. There was a German man who spoke Burmese and English, and he was able to translate. He was a monk there. So it was very, very difficult. And the talk I've titled this talk, "There Are No Obstacles, There Are No Distractions," because it's what I needed to learn, essentially. It's what I learned being there for that period of time. I had tremendously unrealistic expectations. I went to Burma because I wanted to get enlightened. And I was sure that if I went to the hardest teacher in all of the country, maybe in all of the world, it would make me get enlightened. And I had this feeling of, okay, well, this is where the tradition comes from, and it's really set up, and they really honor meditation in a way. It's very different than in the States. It's kind of baby practice. I mean, I had just like all these crazy, crazy stories about why I needed to practice in Burma. And of course, I didn't know I had these. And so it began to fuel my entire experience there, so that anything that didn't match up to conditions that helped me to get enlightened or to have good practice was a problem. So as you can probably imagine, practicing in Burma is not it's not a piece of cake. It's first of all, it's hot. Okay, it's really, really hot. Especially in the summertime. I mean, it's unbearably hot. It's over 100 degrees. As a nun, I had to wear 4 layers of clothes, okay? And you had to. I mean, you couldn't, except when I was in my hut, and then I sent my mother a note saying, please send me shorts. I'm dying here. But and I was in this brick house, and so it would just take in the heat all day, and then I would sit for 6 o'clock sitting, and I would be meditating, and then the cool air would hit the outside of the hut, and it would release it like a brick oven, and I would just be completely drenched in sweat, and this would happen every evening for the entire summertime. So it was hot. There were millions of bugs. I was astonished by the variety of bugs in Burma. It was like there was every day I'd discover a new variety that I'd never seen. Essentially, I would go out to do walking meditation. I was very excited. I remember the first couple of days I'd go out to do walking meditation, and I walk outside, and then the mosquitoes would just come and they'd sort of dive bomb me, and I'd just start, I can't practice. There would be ants. They had spiders the size of my hand. I'm not kidding. Actually, the spiders I liked because they ate the mosquitoes, but there were scorpions, big ones, big scorpions, and snakes, really big snakes, and centipedes, which were poisonous, and if you stepped on them, you could get really sick. So I was sort of sidestepping the bugs and the heat, and then the food was disgusting. It was horrible. The Burmese like to cook with a lot of oil, so they'll cook vegetables in oil, and it'll be sort of a pot with oil with little vegetables floating on top and white rice. It was, and you know, in America, you eat different kinds of food. You might eat Japanese and then French or whatever. In Burma, it's Burmese food. 2 meals a day, Burmese food, white rice. And I was getting sick quite a bit, but you sort of get used to it. It was just kind of getting used to the fact that you're going to have a little bit of sickness. And also, they were building the monastery while I was there. So I was essentially in a compound where work was being done all around me, which meant the way that construction goes in Burma is the workers all live there. So they were living kind of maybe within 20, 30 feet of me, and they would bang hammers and saws and all this all day. Meanwhile, and then at night they would party. So they'd pull out their guitars and they'd start singing songs, and it was unbelievable. I mean, I'm just setting the scene, because everything was a problem to me when I got there. And it was a problem because it seemed like it was a setup. Like everything was conspiring against me so that I couldn't practice well. How could I practice in this noise? How could I practice in this heat? And yet there was some level of determination that I was gonna do it. I was gonna sit through this, because this was the best place to practice. Whatever, I was holding that notion. So I had this level of external conditions, which I continually saw as blocking my ability to have good practice. Meanwhile, there was internal conditions too. I was lonely. I felt isolated. I felt very sort of culturally. It was confusing to me. They didn't understand me so well as a Westerner. There were other Westerners practicing there, but it's primarily a monastery for Burmese people. And so, for instance, if I had any kind of emotional problem, they weren't set up to deal with that, because it's not the way in the Burmese culture to really consider emotions the way they do in the West. So I had my own inner obstacles, and then there were these outer obstacles. And it was this constant feeling of if only this weren't happening, then I could practice. And I would always get to this point where I'd say, okay, everything's fine. I think I'm ready now. I can practice. And then something new would come upon me. Like I just remember, okay, I can deal with the mosquitoes now. I have my mosquito net set up right, and I know what I'm doing, and the bugs aren't scaring me so much anymore. And I remember thinking this, okay, I'm all ready. And then I remember opening up my closet and seeing billions of termites climbing all over and I just thought, oh no, not another thing, I can't deal with it. But that was the quality of it for me. It was always trying to keep everything out in order to practice. And I couldn't see it as part of my practice. It was always an obstacle. I remember going into my friend who had come with me. Well, we had actually met when we got there, and I would go into her, and she's a long-term practitioner, and I would go in and I would cry. I would just sit in her room and cry and say, I can't practice. How can I practice in these conditions? And she would say, it's a different kind of practice. And I would say, huh. And I didn't understand it. And so I had certain coping mechanisms to deal with the difficulties. And one of my coping mechanisms, as I mentioned a little bit, is being strong, steamrolling through it. It's okay, it's awful, it's hot, I can deal with it. My practice is good. Another one would be, if I just wait, it'll change. Those were two of my main ways of doing it. So I'm telling you some of these stories in order to look at the issue of what we have in our practice of expectations around what is good practice and what are good conditions for practice. And one of my friends at the monastery made up what he called the mantra for the monastery, and he called it lower your expectations and purify your motivations. So I pass that on to you if it's helpful, just in general of your practice. And I'm curious, maybe if everybody just take a moment to think, what are your expectations about your meditation practice? What is good practice for you? What are good or perfect practice conditions? Maybe we'll just take a moment and think about it. So maybe, just curious, what, if anybody thought of something that they really needed for their practice to be good, a condition. Does anyone want to share?
I need to be rested.
Rested. Yeah.
I see that question as the koan of my practice. There are no good conditions for practicing. I shouldn't be practicing at all. I should be out having fun. Or working. Or beating myself up for not working. And I can only take refuge in Suzuki Roshi's words that hindrances are very useful for practice. Because I feel hindered every single time I sit down. And I think what one wants is something you can discard. There's nothing to want at all. You just keep, the answer just keeps sitting. There's nothing to expect.
Yeah.
There's nothing to get.
It's very interesting the way we put these stories on about what practice is supposed to be like. Sometimes it's, if only my mind weren't restless, then I could practice. If only I weren't sleepy, then I could practice. If only I could stop thinking, then I could practice. That's a good one. I've heard that many times. By the way, just for beginners, I just want to say you don't stop thinking when you meditate. The hindrances, as you mentioned, they're very powerful because in the Vipassana tradition we talk about the 5 hindrances to practice, five things that are obstacles to practice: sense desire, aversion, restlessness, sleepiness or sloth and torpor, and doubt. And they are hindrances to practice because they make it difficult to meditate. Any one of those 5 things. If your mind is really doubting what's going on, oh, maybe I'm a bad practitioner, oh, am I doing this right? This is what's going on. You're not able to be resting with the breath or resting with the experience. But actually, I don't like to call them hindrances because they too are the experience. The experience of being restless is the experience that's happening in the moment. And that's where I think we get caught, and that's where I got caught in my experience in Burma, where no, I can't practice with the noise. I can't practice with the heat because it's a hindrance. Similarly, in our practice, in our daily practice, we have these external conditions that we look on as hindrances. If only I didn't have to work so many hours, then I could meditate. If only I didn't have to take care of my sick mother, then I could meditate. If only. And I love to notice when my mind makes that comment, if only things were blank, then I could blank, okay? Because it's a bell, it's a mindfulness bell for me that I'm not willing to be with things as they are in this moment. And again, in the daily practice, there's also this quality of what do you do to cope with the things that you think are your hindrances? The restless mind, say your mind is very restless, it feels like a hindrance. I can't meditate, I just want to get up and run away. So what do you do to cope with it? In my case also, I use similar mechanisms to dealing with things in Burma that I did in Burma. Well, I'll just be here and I'll be present with it. And this very tight mind that tries to sort of control it. Or maybe I'll just let myself space out and ultimately it'll change. And I'm sure each of you have your way of going about it. And it's just interesting place in practice to really explore that. What are the things you see as obstacles to your practice? What is the expectation layer that underlies it? And then what do you do to try to get around it rather than being with it? What happened for me in Burma that was so interesting was I I think I wouldn't have stayed as long as I did if I didn't sort of surrender, which is what I had to do. I remember the first couple of months, I basically walked around like this, stay out. That was the feeling that I had. And finally, there was some point where I realized that I had to change my attitude, or I had to change the way I was relating to these things and stop seeing them as obstacles to my good practice, obstacles to my enlightenment. But actually, as my friend Annie had said, these are the practice themselves. This is the practice. And I remember I had this sort of pivotal moment where I was meditating, and my meditation at this point, it was probably about 5 or 6 months, it was getting very intense and very deep, and I could sit for hours, and I was convinced that enlightenment was going to happen just any day now, and actually any second. So I remember I was sitting and I was having this really great sit, and this was it, and I was sitting, and suddenly there's a knock on my door, and I just thought, no. So I get up off the cushion, and I'm just kind of in this sort of concentration fog, and I walk over and I open the door, and it's one of the young boys who work at the monastery, and he had this most beaming smile on his face, and he had brought me a glass of juice, which is the only thing you could drink after 12 o'clock. And he had this thing, and he looks at me and says, "Juice!" And I looked at him and I said, "Get out!" And I couldn't believe that I was so obnoxious to him. It was horrible. But it was this really, then he left, and suddenly it just occurred to me what had happened, how I had acted to him. And I realized, wait a minute, I'm doing something really wrong. This is not meditation practice. This is keeping things out. This is making distinctions. This is not right. So the next day I apologized to him. I felt really bad. But it was really a moment for me of seeing that actually, if I'm trying to make my meditation practice be something, then I'm not doing the practice right. If any time that we're setting ourselves up for things to be a certain way, you're not resting in the moment. And I started using a mantra for myself that I found really helpful, which was, "There's always another mosquito." Because you can't just... It's true. What I found for myself was, any time I would get to a place where I say, okay, now I can cope, now I'm ready, like I mentioned earlier, there would be something else. So the practice became accepting the next mosquito, and accepting the next mosquito, and the next, and the next. And I guess the other big thing I really learned, and if I can offer you something, there isn't a difference between inner and outer obstacles to our practice. It's the mind that relates to them. There aren't really obstacles. It's just the next thing that comes along. And sometimes it feels like it is, but my teacher, Joseph Goldstein, he says, it doesn't matter what it is that the mind doesn't cling to. It doesn't matter what it is that the mind doesn't cling to. We're doing a practice, their meditation practice is about non-clinging to anything, non-clinging to the noise and the boys hammering and playing guitar and the music and the heat and your sick mother and your job. Non-clinging is the essence of the practice. And it's now, for me, coming back and being in America after that period of time. I spent 1.5 years away. As you mentioned, I spent 6 months teaching in a school, and I can talk about that some later if people are interested. But I notice the way I get into these mind states still of assuming that practice has to be a certain way. And it's like when my mind is peaceful, it feels like it's good practice. Whether I'm sitting on the cushion or I'm walking around outside or whatever it is, when my mind is peaceful, it feels like I'm doing the practice right and I gained something from my time in Burma. When my mind is disturbed or distracted or busy or whatever it is, I feel like that's not really practice. And again, it's the same dualistic thinking, because it is all practice. Our lives are all fodder for practice. And this, for me, when I try to put in categories, this is practice and this is not practice, it's like I'm cutting off pieces of myself. I'm cutting off pieces of my experience. I'm saying that I can have something, this is good because it fits in with my notion of what is peacefulness or what is meditation practice or what is a good life or whatever it is. And what I've found, I think, is that practice has become a lot more inclusive, a lot more joyous. It's funnier. There's a sense of just, everything is within the realm of an ability to be aware and to have a mind that doesn't cling. And this is not to say we don't use the tools, because the tool of mindfulness is so profound and it's something you need to sharpen and really develop in order to be able to open it up, in order to open it up to the world. I had another experience in Burma. I was eating. When you're eating there, it's a really crazy thing. I mean, if you've done a Vipassana or a Zen retreat, or I know it's very quiet. You can eat in at least on Vipassana retreats. You can eat in silence by yourself. Nobody bugs you. You can eat very slowly, very mindfully. In Burma, it's basically you're sitting at a table with 4 other people. You can't eat with your eyes closed, or you can't eat just in doing your own practice, because you have to pass things at the table because you're sitting with a bunch of people. So you're passing things. They're coming along. They're giving you things. Sometimes they do things like fan you if it's really hot. I don't know why, but it's sort of the setup in Burma. They like to fan the yogis who are meditating. Then, if there are people who have donated the food, the whole thing is based on dana, right? If they've donated the food, they love to watch you eat. So you're sitting there eating, you're trying to eat mindfully, you're trying to pass the food and at the same time be mindful and not miss that somebody doesn't have a certain kind of greasy vegetable or whatever. And then you have people watching you, and sometimes they're photographing you because, for instance, like they think it's great when Westerners are there practicing, so they like to photograph you eating their food. And sometimes they're videotaping you. And there's all this noise and people running by with plates and this and that. And the sayadaws, the teachers, are up on this platform watching you eat and making sure you're eating mindfully. So it's completely horrible. And I remember, again, in the spirit of what I'm talking about, I had this one time I was sitting there, and it was just this horrible day, and this woman who was had come and sat right down next to me and started fanning me really fast, and then she started. There were flies. Oh yeah, there's millions of flies attacking the food, and she started using her fan to get the flies out of the food. So she's jamming it into the bowls of food. And I'm just sitting there, and I'm getting angrier and angrier and angrier. And trying to be mindful and trying to mindfully be aware of one taste in my mouth. And finally, just something inside me says, it doesn't have to be this way. And I said that, and the next thing it was like sort of burst open, and I could take in everything. I could take in the fanning, I could take in the noise, I could take in the grease, the sharing. It all just became part of the passing show. And it was really powerful for me to just see the power of mindfulness, to take it all in, everything, the good, the bad, all of our pieces of ourself and all of the world and all of the suffering. So I think I'm going to end here and take questions.
Why don't you expand on practice became funnier. Some other stuff I've heard from other people who've practiced in Asia, but I like that expression. Practice became funnier. What does that mean?
Yeah, thanks for asking. I think I stopped taking myself so seriously. That was the first thing. And I started, the things that bugged me became actually pretty hilarious after a while. I remember having these moments. I was going to tell the story, I forgot. The Burmese women are really scared of the bugs, even more scared than I was. And they love to meditate together. I don't know, it was this very weird thing. Like, I would see them meditating. They would all go in at the exact same time. They do walking meditation at the exact same time and walk back to their huts. And I later found out it was because they were scared of walking because of the bugs. And so one day I was walking back to my dormitory, and this Burmese woman started following me. And it was during the rainy season where there were millions and millions of bugs. and we were getting closer towards this one area where there was a little stream and just tons of animals. And we got there, and I knew she was behind me. I knew she was behind me, but I was pretending that I didn't know. But I knew that she was scared, and she was using me as a support. And we get there, and suddenly I see this beetle. And it was about that big. It was humongous. And it was so scary. It looked like a monster. And I stopped and I went, and she was about 3 feet behind me, and she said, "What is it?" And I said, and so she comes up and she says, "We have to run." So we went, 1, 2, 3, and we both screamed, and we went, "Ah!" and we got past it, and we got home, and it was okay. But the reason I'm telling this story is because when I got back, I just reflected, my practice has really changed. Now I'm doing screaming meditation. When was the last time I did scream? And it's like letting in a lightness and a silliness and an ability to really it's all practice. Yeah.
Did you only practice alone, or did you practice? Did you meditate only? It sounds like you were in your hut and very keen on being alone. There was no practice with the sangha in itself. Why did you choose that?
Yeah, there was. If I wanted to, I think the first couple of months I did. There's a Dhamma hall, and you can go and follow the schedule. And although people sort of do their own schedule, you see people sitting and walking simultaneously. I didn't really like sitting in the hall, and I wanted to do really my own thing, and I just sort of got on a roll where I really was enjoying being by myself. Yeah. But there were various times you go in for Dharma talks, and sometimes I'd do like one sitting a day, and with the group. Just depended.
Could you elaborate? I mean, why do you like sitting alone?
Part of it was being able to regulate my own time in a way that felt right. Because sometimes I would sit much longer than an hour, or much shorter, or something like that. Wow, I'm trying to remember.
Do you continue to sit alone, or do you?
I think Sangha is very supportive for me in the daily life practice, but when I do intensive practice, I don't feel the need at this point for doing it with a group of people. And that's changed over the years. I mean, I used to do it when for instance, at IMS, which is my main practice center, you do it's at a 3-month retreat. You're sitting with 100 people and everybody's doing the schedule. I don't know, something just shifted for me. I'm not exactly sure why, but...
Could you kill the mosquitoes, swat at them, or could you even brush them off?
You could brush them off. It was a challenge. The mosquitoes were a humongous challenge for me because there were so many of them, and they would get into the mosquito net. So you'd be meditating, and you'd be very deep in practice, and the next thing, bzzz. It was horrible. I'm sure I accidentally killed a few mosquitoes, but I wasn't supposed to. And it was a wonderful practice, really, of observing my mind around it and my tolerance level and my ability to be compassionate. And also, there was a point where I was really on a roll, and I just thought, I'm going to practice my compassion. I'm going to let a mosquito bite me and just sit and watch my experience. So I sat there on the porch of this place where I was practicing. I changed about 8 months into the practice. And I stood there with my arm out, and I let this mosquito come, and it landed on my arm, and it began to suck my blood. And I just watched it grow and blow up, and it got bigger and bigger and filled with red. And I watched the process in my body and mind of terror and anger and wanting to kill it and wanting to brush it off and wanting to open to it. And it was very, very interesting to just watch this process. And ultimately, finally, I'm just like, if you suck anymore, you're going to explode. So I got rid of it, and I just thought, oh, wow, this was my great act of compassion. Well, it immediately went back to my arm, and I just said, no, I can't deal with this. And I was done with, I sent it away, I blew it away, whatever. I practiced a lot with mosquitoes, to answer your question.
A new
sangha, exactly. Yeah. Yeah.
When I think about a really long-term retreat, I've done a week, I've done 3 days.
Mm.
But when I think about it, I think I would really, really miss people and friends and good books and music. And how did you deal with that over a year?
You missed it. I did. Oh, I missed my friends. I missed food. I missed food a lot. I missed reading. Part of it, for me, I found I just became used to this. This is my life. I know I'm going to get up in the morning and this is what I'm going to do, and so I don't think about it so much. There was a lot of fantasy that went on in the mind, and ultimately I found that to be less productive. It just sort of was distracting. Just sitting with the loneliness. And it was very interesting for me because I sat with a deeper loneliness than I'd ever experienced before in my life. I mean, God, did I want to talk to someone sometimes? I mean, I really, really wanted to talk. And I think I learned a lot by being able to sit with it. So, yeah. Yeah.
Would you go back?
Thank you, American Dharma. I have to say, I don't think I would go back to that monastery. It ended up being very difficult for me to practice within that tradition for many different reasons. One was kind of the cultural differences. I mean, other than all the things I described, but culturally, being a woman in that culture is it's a very patriarchal culture. It's also, as I mentioned earlier, their relationship to the emotional life is nearly non-existent, and the conditions aren't that great. So if you have a good Dharma center here, there's no reason not to practice in the West. That's my belief. But if you have the desire to go to Burma or go to Thailand or something, practice. You should. I strongly encourage people to do it. For me, I don't feel so aligned with that particular system of practice anymore. I was very strongly considered myself to be a Theravadan Buddhist in the lineage of Sayadaw U Pandita, and at this point I actually don't anymore. My year in Burma cured me, sort of. But so I wouldn't go back for those reasons. Yeah.
Because the reason I'm asking is because sometimes I have the feeling that people basically think I had to go through so much pain before I reach that point, and to choose those places because they are very painful sometimes to be in. And now for this experience you have, would you think that would be necessary to go there, or could you actually achieve the same kind of thing by being somewhere else? Yeah. More comfortable place when there's mosquitoes and stuff?
That's a great question. I believe that within our practice, in our practice lives, there are levels of dukkha, of suffering, that come up at various points, and that wherever we are, we work with them. So if it's sort of, I mean, I don't know how much you believe in karma or the process of the way that suffering arises, but what I believe is that if there's something that you have to go through because of past karma, you will go through it, whether it is in Burma or in Spirit Rock or in a Zen center. It's the body and mind, when you're doing the practice, are engaged in a practice of purification, and so it will come up wherever you are. I don't know, one of my teachers I spoke to, she said it sounded like you had some intense work to do, and that's why you ended up there. And I feel really grateful to it. And I don't know if I could have done it here, but my hit is that stuff needed to come up, and did, and would have. So I don't know.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I have another question. Could you talk a little bit about the relationship between this retreat that you did and the socially engaged work that you do?
Sure, yeah. I've been working with the Buddhist Peace Fellowship for a number of years in the base program. Maybe Terry's come and spoken, and yeah. I saw this period as an opportunity to deepen my practice. So I took essentially a year leave, and it ended up being a year and a half. When I went there, my hope was to really deepen my wisdom, deepen my strength of practice, and be able. This is what I thought when I went, and be able to come back and be able to more fully serve the world. Essentially, that was my logic. It was very tricky for a number of different reasons. One of it was choosing to go to Burma in this particular historical moment. I don't know if everybody's aware of the situation in Burma. Yeah.
As much as the newspapers make.
Right, as much as you can, yeah. So it was actually very confusing for me to call myself a socially engaged Buddhist and to be going to Burma. And could my presence in any way have been supporting the military dictatorship there? That was a question that I dealt with, but decided I really wanted to go, that I really wanted to practice there. And I think kind of coming out the other side, there's no question to me that year of practice has profoundly affected my ability to work in the world, because there's ways that I feel more compassionate or more open to, I was able to sit through my own suffering, and that gave me skills to deal with other people's suffering in a way. I was just in terms of Burma itself, I have a very strong heart connection with the people, and it makes me more inclined to be active and do work to help people there. But I don't have as much of I don't any longer think so much that first you do meditation practice, you get to a certain level of awakening, and then you can help the world. To me, that's very dualistic at this point. I see it more as this ongoing process of a continual deepening, and that they feed off each other. You do work in the world, you strengthen your generosity, you strengthen your compassion. It helps your practice on the cushion. Your cushion helps your practice out in the world, and I see it much more as kind of an ongoing flow. So, yeah. So it's 12 o'clock. Oh,
you mentioned something about teaching.
Yeah.
You taught children meditation?
Yeah. I went to Sarnath, India, which is the site of where the Buddha gave his first teaching when after his enlightenment. He walked from Bodh Gaya, which it's now a 3-hour train ride, but he walked to Sarnath. And I met a man who has started a Buddhist-based school for children, village children, so mostly very, very poor villagers, illiterate, formerly illiterate. And then he started the school based in Buddhist principles, and it's just an absolutely incredible place. He teaches regular curriculum, but he also teaches massage and music and dance and meditation and awareness. And he teaches children even as young as about 4 or 5 a sort of a version of the concept of emptiness. For instance, one thing he might do is teach them that no object has, that the perception of the object is dependent upon the mind, and that there's nothing inherent within the object itself. For instance, if he has a glass of juice and he asks one kid, is this juice good? And the kid says, yeah, and the other kid says, this juice is bad. He can say, well, how is that possible? That the juice is the juice good or is the juice bad? Well, it actually doesn't depend. The juice is not inherently good or bad. The juice is dependent upon the perception of the observer. And he teaches this to these children, and they grow up to be, I mean, it's a 12-year experiment, but it's quite a wonderful place. And I went there and I taught Vipassana to 11 to 14-year-olds, and it was great. It was very, very challenging and very inspiring to me. So.
Okay. Well, thank you very much for talking with us today. That was great to hear. Amazing story.
Thanks.
After this we have time to hang out there, social time, and usually there's a group that goes off to lunch, so if you care to join us, please stick around. We have a few announcements.
Yeah, a couple of things I want to be sure to bring up is next week's the picnic. We'll have a 10:30 sitting, and then we can all carpool over afterwards to Tobin Park, Berkeley, I believe it is. So please come, bring food. We're supplying the drinks, so no need to bring anything to drink. That'll all be taken care of. Also, I'm the host today, and wanted to remind everybody about the Donna Bubble. We need your money to continue to pay the rent and everything else. Hope everybody please remember about the newsletter. You need to respond to continue receiving it. We're purging the list in September if everybody hasn't responded. And there's several ways you can do it. It's in the newsletter. You can find phone, email, put a thing in the Donna Bubble. To the new people, if you want to be on the mailing list, there's some cards out there you can sign your address, and we'll add you to our mailing list. We will be going to lunch afterwards. That's a good way to get to meet people if you're interested. Just look for me, and we'll head out probably around 12:30. And I think that's about it. My end. We have the retreat coming up in September too. 10th, 11th, 12th. 9, 10, 11, 10, 11, 12, or whatever. And it starts on Friday. If you have to work on Friday, don't worry. You can come up Friday evening or Saturday morning. And I believe there'll be more specific instructions on that to come in the next couple of weeks.
Yeah, that's a really great experience too, so I encourage you to come. Let's see, there's something else. There's one issue of, we're probably not going to be doing the 9:30 sitting anymore, if any of you are aware if there is one. There are too many people who come, but it's not going to axe that. And there's a thought around starting a little bit earlier so we have a little bit more time and we don't go too far past where people are hungry for lunch. What does the group feel about it that's present today? The thought was maybe starting at 10 o'clock rather than 10:30. Is there anyone who has strong feelings one way or the other?
I'd love the 9:30. I don't come all that much. I guess maybe not a lot of people do, but I loved having it. Now the only problem I have with 10:30 is it always seems to start at 10:25 according to my watch. So I always feel like, if I come at 10:25 and I'm starting, it's hard. So 10 seems to me too early. 10:15 might work. I don't know.
Well, actually, that's kind of what I thought we were discussing, to get off on a much more leisurely start, to allow for people that are taking the bus and stuff, We could have introductions and stuff at 10, and probably start, the actual sitting 10:10, 10:15, something like that. But I have the same problem as you. You never know what you're going to get caught in trying to get over here, and we seem to always just start right off the bat, and
But people show up at 10, there's some people here even before, just going to hang out. We kind of have to come to a consensus on it, so.
I think we're going to discuss it, not this week, but the next week, the discussion
Okay.
is going to be
Okay.
part of the
Good.
plan.
So think about it. And I will close with a dedication of marathon. By the power and the truth of this practice, may all beings have happiness and the causes of happiness. May all be free from sorrow and the causes of sorrow. May all never be separated from the sacred happiness which is without sorrow. And may all live in equanimity, without too much attachment or too much aversion, and live believing in the equality of all that lives.
Thank you for listening to the Gay Buddhist Forum. If you would like to hear several new talks per month and be notified of upcoming speakers so you can participate live, please subscribe to this podcast, like us on Facebook, and join our mailing list by visiting gaybuddhist.org.